Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album from Chelsea Wolfe called Spun. So here's something I don't often talk about when it comes to artists releasing albums in a sequence that shows the sound getting progressively bigger. You might start off kind of small or frail, relying more on haunted atmosphere or fragile tunes, but as you get a little bit more of a budget or a bit more of a presence, you might be inclined to add some more instrumentation, thicken the mix depth, wrench the progressions into weirder or darker or heavier territory. And yet, unless you're a band like Swans, eventually the excess is going to hit a breaking point, and you run the risk of losing the subtleties and power that was part of your original strength as a group. Now, that was honestly one of my biggest concerns going into this newest album from Chelsea Wolfe. The haunted, gothic folk of her very early albums was often pretty sparse, pretty bleak, but there was something primal and chilling about its ramshackle side that pulled me in, especially her 2011 record, Apocalypsis. And while I did have some appreciation for her 2013 record, Pain is Beauty, and its fuller, slightly more gothic and theatrical sound, I worried that something might end up getting lost the way she was going. And then Abyss happened 2 years later in 2015, driving straight into doom metal and noise and thunderously gritty walls of sound. If anything, it felt more representative of her themes and style than Pain is Beauty. But I wondered how she could possibly follow it, especially as her record this year, Spun, looking to be doubling down on that sound. Granted, getting Queens of the Stone Age guitarist Troy Van Leeuwen, Happy Fang's drummer Jess Gowrie, and a guest appearance from post-metal band ISIS's frontman Aaron Turner, and all being produced by the Converge guitarist Kurt Ballou, it showed an impressive commitment to going there and really fleshing out that metal sound. So, okay, what did Chelsea Wolfe unleash here with Spun? This album surprised me, and in ways that I wasn't expecting. Hell, on my first 4 or so listens, I was inclined to say, unfortunately, it had lived down to my expectations and predictions. A record that couldn't possibly live up to the raw, crushing nightmare of Abyss, and thus suffered in comparison. And while for parts of this album that might seem somewhat true, Spun, it takes a slightly different approach than Abyss that only really got under my skin when I truly decoded the lyrics and themes underpinning this album. Because while I might have said that Abyss lost some of its immense power when it brought things back down to the human level, Spun somehow develops even more power the closer to humanity it comes. The last album utilized the crushing force of that dark unknown, while Spun, it's probing what's within it and whatever humanity might be found, and seeing what's gonna bite. Before we get to that, it's important to discuss how the sound has cultivated that shift from Abyss, because the tone and overall style and texture of the production, that's worth discussing. Now, doom metal's still the meaty core of both albums, but the brand of noise on Spun, it's more complex, notably helped by Troy Van Leeuwen adding more melodies to the crushing waves of distortion, augmented by kick drums that seem a tad faster and nervier to augment the thick, roiling bass lines. Hell, by the time you get to songs like Vex, you can hear hints of tremolo riffing, almost black metal inspired, touching the background against the grinding riffs, showcasing a commitment to deeper atmosphere that might not feel as thick, but exposes more ragged edges in those guitars and grooves. And that's important because while Abyss occasionally leaned on bells or otherwise traditionally gothic elements to intensify that atmosphere, Spun, it pulls from more primal tones, looking a little bit further backwards, reminiscent of the haunted folk music that touched a lot of Chelsea Wolfe's earlier work, like the sparse electric strums and textured percussion that anchors Twin Fawn before the pummeling riffs crash in, or the brittle acoustics of Two Spirit with phenomenal ambient texture, or the keening, ghostly vocals against the raw drum pickups and spikes of guitar on static hum. Hell, one of my favorite movements on this record comes in the interlude strain, just with that binaural drum pattern that goes back and forth. In other words, for as abrasive as this album can get, and by the 9 hells it does so with the grimy creep of the guitar on 16 Psyche, or the flattened growl of the culling, or that utterly filthy explosion on the hook of static hum, which somehow gets even more biting on the closing crack scrape, complete with the metal dragging its metal against the roiling riffs. It's a record that knows how to play with tension and take its time without feeling too long-winded, which actually kind of caught me off guard considering how long Abyss could feel at points. Now, granted, not all the sonic experiments work, and it's really a scattering of minor things. I'm a little bit on the fence about Kurt Ballew's production, if only because John Congleton on Abyss seemed to have a slightly better grasp on raw texture behind some of these grooves, especially coming off of some of the crescendos and transitions like on Particle Flux. You wish that it came in a little harder there, but again, you can only do so much for a fair few songs that you don't include a bass guitar on at all, and then try to plug in fizzy electronic percussion instead. Again, Particle Flux probably comes the closest to actually pulling that frenetic, deeper tone off, but when you have Offering nearly going for dark wave but with not significant foundation or development, it feels like a fragment of a song that needed a little bit more development. Similar case with the second interlude, Welt. I get the piano interjection for more melody, and it is just an interlude, but it's repeating a motif in the lyrics I didn't find all that compelling on the culling, and it just didn't grab me all that much. Now, what did work, much to my surprise, was Aaron Turner showing up for Vex, as his growl vocals worked pretty damn well on the outro to pay off the song's narrative development, even if Chelsea Wolfe really does own this album from top to bottom. Now, that's one credit I will give Ballew in production, in that between the carefully measured, distant multi-tracking and the smart mix balance, I can nearly always hear Chelsea Wolfe, even if it's going to take a few listens to figure out what she's actually singing about, pushing her range from her subdued lower notes to the higher soprano, where she's never sounded better. Unlike Abyss that seemed designed to smother so many of her vocals intentionally, the feel of his Spun is more focused, almost a little bit more personal, focusing on her personal neuroses, and that takes us to the content. And the biggest coup of this album. Chelsea Wolfe has described the title of this record capturing two distinct concepts, the hiss being the white noise of our universe and that great bleak unknown, and Spun being an addiction to it, a craving to plummet its depths. This is a record that might seem initially to treat that hiss as something to be avoided or deflected, but in reality, something raw and primal within Chelsea Wolfe is gonna drag her back to it. And yet right from the first few songs, you realize there's something much more intimate going on, where primal is meant in every sense of the word. You know, maybe it's just me, but go to a song like 16 Psyche, and there's a certain sexiness, for lack of a better word, to some of these songs, where clarity and a way through that unstable hiss might come through that apex of pleasure, which she clearly feels on that high note. But of course, that vulnerability that comes with giving there opens up a lane for real pain. And since Chelsea Wolfe has learned the lesson of Abyss, she's gonna take it both upon in whatever twisted flux of a connection she forges, most of which opens up lanes into her past. I mean, this is love that's used as therapy, used as exorcism, where songs like The Culling highlight the sun rising in the same terms like an act like Swans would use, a clarity that purifies and burns away whatever lurks ahead. And it's not pretty what she finds. Frigid but feral defense mechanisms driven by a stillborn twin on twin Fawn, her own consciousness unraveling in the pain as she stares it in the face, even seeing the relationship that she has dragged forth expose her rotten, dead-eyed lies, giving her the clarity to find an innocence that was stolen too young. And if you heard the references to family on earlier songs like The Culling, and you think you know exactly where this is going with some of the sexuality, especially as it was very clear this was covered up for years, if not decades, in the anonymous private fog, yeah, Chelsea Wolfe actually confirmed a bit of that. It's one of the reasons why the confrontation on Scrape has such power. This isn't just a woman confronting a figure that abused her and others as part of her family. This is Chelsea Wolfe, who damn near tore her own psyche apart in order to find and shred the craven plague carrier that tainted her innocence too young, while her mind still feels that trauma confronting him. The rotten hypocrisy that she scrapes out with the same bloody glass that cut her vulnerability forth before. And while it might be kind of graphic as hell, it's not framed as a triumphant moment. It has the feel of a personal excision that might not give her peace, but at least a well-earned moment of relief. In other words, if you can't tell by now, his Spun is not an easy listen, but it's not designed to be. And how Chelsea Wolfe frames such a daring, deeply personal dive into the hissing unknown, or rather things that she knew all along and wished to believe as unknown, anchored only in braided tethers of ecstasy and agony, makes it one hell of an experience all the same. Now, it's not perfect. From a production standpoint, I wish the low end felt a little bit more developed, and there are a few missteps when it comes to some of the experimentation, at least for me, but the intense delivery, the primal power of this writing, far more potent. For me, 8 out of 10, definitely a recommendation if you appreciate Chelsea Wolfe's continued exploration of this sound and style. And even if you don't, it's a sort of harrowing, well-crafted, and really quite daring album that's always worth your time. Not always a pleasant journey, but it's not designed to be. And it's a gripping one all the same. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. I'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I'll admit that some of the themes and arc of this album might be a little bit too much for people who aren't used to doom metal or these particular sounds or themes, and even going in that direction is pushing it. But hey, if you want to buy the album, and I suggest you do because it really is something, links in the description below. And I'm curious where other more hardcore Chelsea Wolfe fans fall on this, because I thought it was pretty damn great. So I'd like to hear where you're coming from. So the poll's right there. Beyond that, if you guys want to support this channel, or you guys want to get more involved in my scheduling process, link to my Patreon is right over there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once a week for the higher tier contributors, you get to add albums, movies, or even a top 10 list to that schedule. More details right over there. I'm so grateful for your support. But till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.